She believed love meant sacrifice. So when the man she loved was dying, she did the unthinkable. She sold her kidney to keep him alive. He promised to marry her. He promised never to leave her. But years later, she opened her phone and discovered he was engaged to another woman. Not just any woman. The governor's daughter. This is Sarah's heartbreaking story.
The rain fell heavily that night. Thunder echoed across the city as Sarah rushed through the hospital corridor. Her heart pounded against her chest. Tears blurred her vision. She had never been so afraid in her life. The doctors had just delivered devastating news. Michael was dying. The man she loved. The man she had planned to spend the rest of her life with. The man who had stood beside her through years of struggle. Without surgery, he had only weeks to live. Sarah pushed open the hospital room door. Michael lay motionless on the bed. Machines surrounded him. His face looked pale, weak, broken. Sarah slowly sat beside him and held his hand. For several moments she said nothing. She simply stared at him, praying, begging God for a miracle. Then Michael opened his eyes. A weak smile appeared on his face. "You're crying again." Sarah quickly wiped her tears. "I'm not." Michael chuckled softly. "You've never been a good liar." Sarah forced a smile. But her heart was breaking. Because she knew something Michael didn't. The surgery cost more money than they could ever afford. Far more. Michael squeezed her hand. "Don't worry. We'll get through this." Sarah nodded. But deep inside she wasn't sure. That night, after Michael fell asleep, Sarah sat alone outside the hospital. The cold wind brushed against her skin. She stared at the hospital bill in her hands. The amount looked impossible. She called relatives. No one could help. She called friends. Nobody had money. She visited churches, community groups, charities. Every door remained closed. Days passed. Michael's condition continued getting worse. Sarah stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, stopped taking care of herself. Her entire world revolved around one goal: saving Michael. One evening, while sitting in a hospital waiting room, she overheard two strangers talking. A single sentence changed everything. "You can get paid for donating a kidney." Sarah froze. Her heart skipped a beat. The thought terrified her. But the more she thought about it, the more it refused to leave her mind. That night she barely slept. She kept hearing Michael's voice, his laughter, his promises, his dreams. And by sunrise she had made her decision. A decision that would change her life forever. 3 weeks later, Michael was wheeled into surgery. Doctors prepared the operating room. Nurses rushed through the hallways. Everyone called it a miracle. Nobody knew where the money had come from. Nobody knew Sarah had secretly sold one of her kidneys. Nobody knew she had spent days recovering from her own surgery while pretending everything was normal. Nobody knew she still woke up every morning in pain. Not even Michael. Especially not Michael. Because Sarah never told him. She didn't want gratitude. She didn't want praise. She only wanted him alive. Hours later, the surgeon emerged from the operating room. A smile appeared on his face. The surgery was successful. Sarah burst into tears. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe. Michael was going to live. And for her, that was enough. Or so she thought. Months passed. Michael recovered completely. His strength returned. His smile returned. His dreams returned. Life seemed beautiful again. One evening they sat together beneath their favorite tree near the river. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. Michael held Sarah's hand. Then he looked into her eyes. "Sarah." "Yes. When I become successful." Sarah smiled. "Here we go again." Michael laughed. "No, listen. When I become successful, I'm going to marry you." Sarah looked away shyly. You always say that. Because I mean it. He squeezed her hand tighter. I promise. No matter what happens. No matter how successful I become. No matter how rich I become. You will always be the woman I marry. Sarah felt her heart melt. At that moment she believed him completely. She had no reason not to. Michael was different. Or at least she thought he was. Years passed. Michael completed medical school, graduating at the top of his class. The future looked bright. Everyone celebrated his success. His family was proud. His professors praised him. The community admired him. And nobody was prouder than Sarah. After all, she had sacrificed everything for that moment. Soon Michael received a job offer from one of the most prestigious private hospitals in the country. The salary was incredible. The opportunities were endless. For the first time in his life, he had money. Real money. The kind of money he had once only dreamed about. And slowly, very slowly, things began to change. At first, Sarah barely noticed. Michael became busier, which made sense. He was building a career. Then the phone calls became shorter. Then less frequent. Then occasional. Soon entire days passed without hearing from him. Whenever Sarah called, there was always an excuse. I'm working. I'm exhausted. I'll call later. But later never came. Sarah tried to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. She trusted him. She loved him. And love often makes people blind to things they don't want to see. One afternoon she decided to surprise him at work. She bought his favorite meal, carefully packed everything, and headed to the hospital. What she saw there would become the beginning of her heartbreak. Sarah smiled as she walked through the hospital gates. The aroma of Michael's favorite jollof rice drifted from the food flask in her hands. She imagined the smile on his face when he saw her. For a moment, life felt normal again. She greeted the security guard, who had seen her many times before. Good afternoon, madam. Good afternoon. Dr. Michael is on the 5th floor. Thank you. Sarah stepped into the elevator. Her heart was full of excitement. She had missed him. For almost 2 weeks, they had barely spent any time together. Whenever she called, he was busy. Whenever she suggested meeting, something always came up. She convinced herself it was because of work. After all, he was now one of the youngest doctors in the hospital. He had responsibilities. As the elevator doors opened, Sarah walked quietly down the corridor. She wanted to surprise him. Before she reached his office, she heard laughter. Michael's laughter. She smiled. Then she looked through the glass door. Inside, Michael was laughing with a beautiful young woman dressed in an elegant white suit. The woman couldn't have been more than 28. She carried herself with confidence. Every nurse who walked past greeted her with respect. Sarah assumed she was a patient. She waited. But instead of ending the conversation, Michael gently pulled out a chair for her. He poured her a drink. He laughed at everything she said. Sarah had never seen him behave that way around anyone. Just then, a nurse approached Sarah. Oh, are you looking for Dr. Michael? Yes. The nurse smiled politely. He's with Miss Amanda. Who's Amanda? The nurse lowered her voice. She's the governor's daughter. Sarah forced a smile. I see. The entire hospital knows they're close. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. What do you mean? The nurse shrugged. They've been spending a lot of time together lately. Before Sarah could ask another question, the office door opened. Michael stepped outside. The smile on his face disappeared the moment he saw Sarah. Sarah, she lifted the food flask. I brought you lunch. Michael glanced behind him nervously. You should have called first. Sarah noticed something strange. He wasn't happy to see her. He looked uncomfortable. Amanda walked out of the office. She smiled politely. Michael, aren't you going to introduce me? Michael hesitated. This is Sarah. Amanda stretched out her hand. Nice to meet you. Sarah shook it. You too. Amanda smiled warmly. I've heard so much about you. Sarah looked at Michael. His expression changed instantly. He quickly interrupted. Amanda, we should get back. Amanda nodded. It was lovely meeting you, Sarah. She walked away. Michael remained silent. Sarah looked into his eyes. Who is she? My boss's daughter. You seem close. Michael laughed nervously. It's nothing. You don't need to worry. Sarah wanted to believe him. She truly did. But something inside her whispered. Something had changed. Over the following months, Michael changed even more. He bought expensive suits, a luxury car, a new apartment in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. Whenever Sarah visited, she felt out of place. The simple young man she had fallen in love with seemed to disappear a little more every day. One evening they had dinner together. Sarah finally gathered the courage to speak. Michael, when are we going to tell our families about the wedding? Michael stopped eating. His smile faded. Wedding? You promised. I know. So? Michael sighed deeply. Can we not talk about this tonight? Sarah forced a smile. Okay, but her heart grew heavier. A few weeks later, Sarah called Michael 15 times. No answer. She sent messages. No reply. The next morning she tried again. His phone was switched off. Days passed. Nothing. Then, while scrolling through social media, a photograph appeared. At first she smiled. She thought it was an old hospital event. Then she looked closer. Michael stood beside Amanda. They were wearing matching outfits. The caption read, "Congratulations to Dr. Michael and Miss Amanda on their engagement." Sarah's phone slipped from her hands. It hit the floor with a loud crack. She stared at the screen, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to cry. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. Not after 6 years. Not after all the sacrifices. She called him immediately. No answer. Again. No answer. Again. Still nothing. Hours later, a message finally arrived. We need to talk. Those 4 words broke what was left of her heart. The following evening, they met at the same riverside where Michael had once promised to marry her. Sarah arrived early. She looked at the tree beneath which they had shared dreams, the bench where they had laughed together, the river that had witnessed their promises. Nothing had changed, except them. Michael arrived 20 minutes late. He looked uncomfortable. He couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah stood. Tears already filled her eyes. Tell me it isn't true. Michael remained silent. Please. I need to hear it from you. He finally spoke. It's true. Sarah felt as though the world had stopped turning. Why? Michael rubbed his forehead. It's complicated. No. She shook her head. It isn't. Why? Michael looked away. Amanda's family can help my career. Sarah stared at him. So, that's all I am? He said nothing. So after everything we've been through, you choose money? You choose power? You choose influence? Michael finally looked at her. You don't understand. Sarah laughed through her tears. No, Michael. I understand perfectly. I just never thought you were this kind of man. Michael opened his mouth to speak. But before he could say another word, Sarah whispered something that left him speechless. I gave you everything, and you couldn't even give me the truth. She turned and walked away. Michael watched her disappear into the darkness. Neither of them realized the greatest secret of all was still hidden. Sarah walked home that night without knowing how she got there. The streets were crowded. Cars honked. People laughed. Life continued as though nothing had happened. But inside her, everything had died. She entered her tiny apartment, locked the door, and collapsed onto the floor. For hours, she cried until no tears remained. She replayed every memory. Their first meeting. Their first date. The night she stayed awake praying for his surgery. The scar hidden